You think betrayal hurts? Try walking in on your wife, in your own bed, with your best friend. I didn't scream, I didn't fight. EGOT even, the perfect marriage. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast a warm, golden hue across the room, illuminating the quiet intimacy of Ethan and Rachel's shared space. Ethan, an ear nurse whose days were a relentless ballet of life and death, found solace in these moments of domestic tranquility. His hands, accustomed to the urgent precision of saving lives, now gently traced the curve of Rachel's back as she slept beside him. Rachel, a marketing executive whose calm and ambition were as undeniable as her quick wit, stirred slightly, a soft sigh escaping her lips. 5 years of marriage, and every morning still felt like a new beginning, a affirmation of the deep, unwavering love that bound them. Their life, from the outside, was a portrait of modern marital bliss, shared laughter over late-night takeout, spontaneous weekend getaways, and the comfortable rhythm of two lives perfect. Ethan loved Rachel with a fierce, protective devotion, a love that had deepened with every shared triumph and every weathered storm. He saw their future laid out before them, a tapestry woven with threads of shared dreams, a house with a sprawling garden, the pitter-patter of tiny feet, the quiet joy of growing old together. The recent discussions about starting a family, about the delicate dance of IVF treatments, had only solidified his conviction. This was it. This was his forever. He was building a life, a legacy, with the woman he believed was his soulmate. Their story began in a bustling city coffee shop, a chance encounter amidst the morning rush. Ethan, nursing a lukewarm latte after a grueling night shift, had been captivated by Rachel's infectious laugh and the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about her passion for art. He, usually reserved, found himself drawn into her orbit, a moth to a vibrant flame. Their first date, a chaotic but memorable picnic in the park, had cemented their connection. They talked for hours, sharing dreams, fears, and the unspoken anxieties of young adulthood. Rachel, with her boundless energy and creative spirit, was the perfect counter to Ethan's calm, grounded nature. She pushed him out of his comfort zone, encouraged him to embrace new experiences, and filled his life with a vibrant energy he hadn't known he was missing. He, in turn, offered her a steady presence, a safe harbor in the often turbulent waters of her ambitious career. They were a team, a partnership, built in mutual respect, unwavering support, and a profound, almost telepathic understanding. Their wedding, a sun-drenched affair in a quaint vineyard, had been a celebration of not just their love, but of the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities. Every anniversary, every shared holiday, every quiet evening spent curled on the couch, had reinforced Ethan's belief that he had found his person, his true north. He was a man who believed in the sanctity of vows, in the enduring power of love, and he had poured every ounce of his being into nurturing this perfect, beautiful life. The signs he ignored, the subtle shifts began almost imperceptibly, like the slow, creeping tide that erodes a coastline. At first, Ethan dismissed them as the natural ebb and flow of any long-term relationship, or perhaps the added stress of Rachel's demanding marketing career. She became emotionally distant, her once effusive affection replaced by a polite, almost attached cordiality. Her kisses grew shorter, her hugs less lingering, as if an invisible barrier had slowly erected itself between them. The easy banter that had once filled their home was replaced by a quiet tension, a palpable sense of unease that settled in the air like dust when he tried to bridge the gap, to ask what was wrong. She'd offer vague excuses. Just I at Ethan, or a lot on my plate at work. Her eyes, once so open and expressive, now seemed veiled, guarded, as if shielding a secret world he was no longer privy to. Then came the phone. It became an extension of her, clutched possessively, its screen often angled away from his view. The incessant ping of notifications, the quick, almost furtive glances she'd cast at it, the way she'd excuse herself to take calls in another room, these were not the actions of the open, transparent woman he had married. He'd catch her whispering into the phone, her voice hushed, her demeanor secretive. When he'd ask who she was talking to, she'd offer a dismissive, just a friend or work stuff, her tone bordering on irritation. He tried to engage her, to ask about her day, to share anecdotes from his own. But her attention was fragmented, her responses are monosyllabic, her eyes constantly darting back to the glowing rectangle in her hand. On evening, as they sat on the couch, a rare moment of quiet, he reached for her hand, and she flinched, pulling away as if burned. "What's wrong, Rachel?" he'd asked, his voice last, with a concern he could no longer hide. She'd mumbled something about being tired, about a headache, but her eyes, usually so expressive, were veiled, distant. The intimacy that had once flowed so effortlessly between them had become a strained, awkward dance. Her accusations of him being too controlling were a new and particularly painful development. Ethan, who prided himself on being supportive and understanding, was blind. "Why are you always questioning me, Ethan?" she'd snap, her voice sharp with an unfamiliar edge. "Can't I have my own life? My own friends?" He'd try to explain, to reassure her that his concern stemmed from love, not control, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The arguments grew more frequent, more heated, each one leaving a fresh wound in the fabric of their marriage. He felt like he was walking on eggshells, constantly afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing, constantly trying to decipher the shifting landscape of her moods. The woman he loved was becoming a stranger, and the distance between them grew wider with each passing day. The late nights out became a regular occurrence, accompanied by vague explanations of work events or girls' nights out with her friend, Lily. Ethan knew Lily, a colleague with Rachel's, but they weren't particularly close. He found it odd that Rachel was suddenly spending so much time with her, especially given Lily's reputation for being a bit of a party animal. He tried to be understanding, to give her space, to offer comfort. He'd bring her flowers, cook her favorite meals, suggest weekend getaways. But his gestures were met with a polite, almost detached gratitude. The warmth, the spark, the deep connection that had defined their marriage seemed to be fading, replaced by an unsettling void. His gut, the same gut that had guided him through countless life or death situations, an ER nurse, began to churn with an insistent unease. It whispered warnings, painted unsettling scenarios, but his love, a love so profound it bordered on blind devotion, refused her. Listen. He wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. The alternative was too painful to contemplate. He was a man who fixed things, and he was determined to fix this, whatever this was. He just didn't know yet that the problem wasn't a broken car, but a broken trust, and that the repairs would be far more devastating than he could ever imagine. His best friend, Chris, a man he had known since childhood, a man he trusted implicitly, was the first to voice the unspoken. They were at their usual pub, nursing beers, when Chris, his brow furrowed with concern, leaned in. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. I saw Rachel the other day. Ethan's heart gave a hopeful lurch. Maybe she'd been out with Chris's wife. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. "Oh yeah, where?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Chris took a long swig of his beer, his gaze steady. "She was at the new coffee shop downtown, the one with the outdoor seating. And she wasn't alone. She was with a guy. They were close, too close for just friends." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Ethan felt a cold dread spread through him, but his immediate reaction was denial, a fierce, protective instinct to shield Rachel from any accusation. "Chris, come in. Rachel has new friends. She's been stressed with work, with the IVF. You're jumping to conclusions." Chris sighed, his eyes filled with a weary understanding. "Look, man, I hope I'm wrong. But I've seen this before. Just be careful. Keep your eyes open." Unbeknownst to Ethan, the man Chris had seen Rachel with was, in fact, Chris himself. Their betrayal was already a festering wound, hidden beneath layers of deceit and false camaraderie. Chris, the trusted confidant, was the serpent in their garden, poisoning their perfect life from within. And Ethan, blinded by love and loyalty, was walking straight into the trap. The signs were there, subtle at first, then glaring, but his love, his desire to believe in the perfect life, had blinded him. He had been so focused on fixing things, on being the hero, that he had failed to see the rot beneath the surface. The betrayal had been a brutalison, but it had also been a catalyst for profound personal growth. He was stronger, wiser, more attuned to the complexities of human nature, both good and bad. He was about to target a full dose of the hardest medicine, and it would change everything. Gut feeling turns into evidence. The lipstick-stained shirt lay crumpled on the bathroom floor, a vibrant slash of crimson against the muted tones of their laundry. It wasn't Rachel's shade. Rachel favored soft, subtle corals and newts, colors that complemented her fair complexion. This was a bold, almost aggressive red, a color Ethan had never seen her wear, a cold not tightened in his. He picked it up, the fabric still carrying a faint, unfamiliar scent, a mix of cheap perfume and something musky, distinctly masculine. He held it to his nose, inhaling deeply, trying to place the scent, trying to deny the insidious whisper of suspicion that was growing louder in his mind. He confronted Rachel that evening, holding up the shirt, his voice carefully neutral. "Whose is this, Rachel? And what's this lipstick?" She flinched, her eyes darting away, a flicker of panic in their depths. "Oh, that," she stammered, her voice a little too high, a little too quick. "It's Lily's. She spilled something on her shirt at work, and I lent her mine. She must have left this one here." The explanation was flimsy, transparent, but Ethan, desperate to believe, forced a smile. Right, of course, he wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. But the seed of doubt, once planted, was now taking root, its tendrils slowly strangling the last vestiges of his trust. The lies became more frequent, more elaborate. Rachel's whereabouts grew increasingly, her stories riddled with inconsistencies. "I was at a client dinner," she'd say, but her breath wouldn't carry the faint scent of wine or rich food. "I was working late at Theophius," but her clothes wouldn't bear the faint creases of a long day spent hunched over a desk. Ethan, the ER nurse, trained to spot the subtle tells of deception, found himself analyzing her every word, every gesture, every fleeting expression. He felt like a detective in his own home, piecing together fragments of a puzzle he desperately wished didn't exist. He'd ask innocuous questions, trying to catch her in a lie, but she was becoming adept at evasion, her answers smooth, practiced, almost too perfect. The woman he loved was a stranger, a master of disguise, and he was losing himself in the labyrinth of her deceit. One quiet evening, as Ethan was scrolling through news articles on his iPad, a notification pet, startling him. It was a message from Chris, addressed to Rachel on her Synthesipod, which lay open on the coffee table. Ethan's heart leaped into his throat. He knew Heschel didn't look, but a primal urge, a desperate need for answers, propelled him forward. His eyes fixated on the screen, and the words burned themselves into his mind. "I miss last night. I can still smell you." The world tilted on its axis. The air left his lungs in a ragged josp. The screen blurred through his tear-filled eyes. Chris, his best friend, the man he'd trusted with his life, the man who had warned him to keep his eyes open. The betrayal was a physical blow, a searing pain that ripped through his chest, leaving him gasping for air. He felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of disorientation. The perfect life he had so carefully constructed, the life built on love and trust, had been a cruel illusion, a house of cards built on a foundation of lies. He was devastated, confused, and utterly, irrevocably broken. The man who fixed things was slowly realizing that some things, once broken, might be beyond repair. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow, but the truth, he knew, was often the hardest medicine. And he was about to get a full dose. The ultimate betrayal, caught in the act the next day. Rachel announced she had a crucial work event, a late-night conference with a potential new client. Her voice was calm, her demeanor professional, a stark contrast, tough hurricane raging. Inside Ethan, he nodded, feigning understanding, his mind already formulating a plan. He would follow her. He had to. The need for definitive proof, for an undeniable, irrefutable confirmation of his worst fears, consumed him. He spent the day in a haze, his shifts at the EI, a blur of urgent care and controlled chaos. But beneath their surface, a cold, calculating resolve was hardening within him. He wouldn't scream, he wouldn't fight. He would get even. As evening descended, Ethan watched Rachel leave, her usual hurried kiss a mere brush against his cheek. He waited a few minutes, then slipped out of the house, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He kept a safe distance, his eyes fixed on her car, a dark shadow in the fading light. He expected her to drive to a hotel, a secluded restaurant, some clandestine meeting place. But instead, she took a familiar turn, a turn that led directly back to their quiet, tree-lined street. His breath hitched. She was going home, their home. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, the audacity, the sheer, unadulterated disrespect, a cold fury, unlike anything he had ever known, began to simmer beneath his carefully constructed facade. He parked his car a few blocks away, his hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. He watched as Rachel's car pulled into their driveway, the garage door silently opening and closing behind her. He waited, his mind racing, trying to comprehend the depth of her betrayal. He knew he had to go in. He had to see. He had to confront the monster that had stolen his life. He approached the house, his footsteps muffled by the soft grass. The front door was unlocked, a chilling testament to her carelessness, or perhaps her brazen confidence. He slipped inside, the familiar scent of their home, once a comfort, now a suffocating reminder of his shattered dreams. He moved silently through the living room, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement, his ears straining for any sound. He heard muffled voices, laughter coming from their bedroom. His blood turned to ice. He crept up the stairs, each step a deliberate act of will, his heart hammering against his ribs, a drumbeat of impending doom. The bedroom door was ajar, a sliver of light escaping Jinto, the darkened hallway. He pushed it open slowly, silently, his eyes adjusting to the dim light within. And then he saw them, Rachel, his wife, in their bed, with Chris, his best friend. The scene was a grotesque tableau of his worst nightmares come to life. He felt a primal scream building in his chest, but it remained trapped, a silent testament to the depth of his agony. He didn't scream, he didn't fight. He raised his phone, his hands steady despoteth, tremor in his soul, and began to record. Every whispered endearment, every intimate talk, every act of betrayal, he captured it all, a chilling testament to their deceit. He recorded for what felt like an eternity, the images burning themselves into his memory, a permanent scar on his psyche. When he was done, he silently reached into his pocket, pulled out his wedding ring, the symbol of a love he thought was real, and dropped it on Taith's bedside table, a silent, damning accusation. He turned and walked away, his footstep light, almost ethereal, as if he were floating above his own shattered reality. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The images were seared into his mind, a permanent reminder of the ultimate betrayal. He was broken, yes, but a new resolve, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, was beginning to form within him. He would not just survive this Hewald rise, and he would make them pay. The game was over, and the revenge was just beginning. Break down before the revenge. The world outside the bedroom, the world he had meticulously built, had ceased to exist. Ethan walked out of his house, not knowing where he was going, the cold night air a stark contrast to the burning inferno within. He drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring in two streaks of color, his mind a chaotic maelstrom of images and emotions. The laughter, the promises, the shared dreams all twisted into grotesque caricatures of what he thought was real. He found himself at a deserted park, the swings swaying gently in the wind, a poignant reminder of the children they had planned to have. He slumped onto a cold bench, the weight of the betrayal crushing him, stealing his breath. He didn't cry. The tears were trapped somewhere deep inside, frozen by the shock. He just sat there, numb, asked. First rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, mocking his despair. Days bled into weeks. Ethan became a ghost in his own life. He called in sick to work, unable to face the world, unable to pretend that everything was fine. He ate little, slept less, his nights haunted by the replays of the video. The image of Rachel and Chris, their bodies intertwined, a constant loop of agony. He watched old videos of their wedding, their honeymoon, their anniversaries, each frame a fresh stab to his heart. He saw the joy, their genuine love, the innocent belief in their future, and the contrast with his current reality was a torment beyond words. He would curl up on the couch, the wedding album clutchado his chest, the silent sobs shaking his entire body. The man who had always been the strong one, the rescuer, was now utterly, completely broken. He felt a profound sense of shame, of failure. How could he have been so blind? How could he have loved someone who could betray him so completely, so cruelly? His apartment, once a sanctuary, became a prison. The walls seemed to close in on him, suffocating him with memories. He avoided looking at himself in the mirror, unable to foresee the hollow-eyed stranger staring back. The pain was a physical entity, a constant ache in his chest, a tightness in his throat. He considered leaving, disappearing, starting over somewhere. No one knew his name, no one knew his story. The thought of facing Rachel, of facing Chris, of facing the pity and judgment of their mutual friends was unbearable. He was adrift, lost in a sea of despair, with no compass, no anchor, no hope. One particularly dark morning, as the sun struggled to pierce through the heavy curtains, Ethan found himself standing before the full-length mirror in his bedroom. He looked at his reflection, truly looked at it, for the first time in weeks. He saw the gaunt face, the bloodshot eyes, the slumped shoulders. He saw a man defeated, a man who had given up, and in that moment, something shifted. A flicker of anger, a spark of defiance, ignite within him. He saw the wedding ring, still on his finger, a cruel mockery of his vows. He ripped it off, the cold metal a sudden weight in his palm. He looked at his reflection again, and this time he saw not a victim, but a survivor. He saw the strength that had carried him through countless emergencies, the resilience that had defined his career. He wiped the tears from his eyes, a fierce resolve hardening his jaw. He wouldn't be broken. Hugh wouldn't let them win. He would rise, and he would take back control of his life. Thedspair began to recede, replaced by a cold, clear focus. The game was indeed over, but a new one was about to begin. And this time, Ethan would be playing to win. Sweet revenge begins. The transformation was swift and chilling. The broken man who had wept over wedding videos was gone, replaced by a strategist, a meticulous planner. Ethan's mind, once consumed by grief, now operated with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. His first move was financial. He spent days meticulously untangling their shared assets, leveraging his knowledge of their joint accounts, investments, and properties. Rachel, caught up in her new clandestine life, had been careless, leaving him with ample opportunity. He transferred funds, liquidated joint investments, and secured loans in his name, all within the bounds of legal marital rights. By the time he was done, Rachel's financial standing, intertwined with his, was a shadow of its former self. He left her with just enough to avoid immediate legal repercussions. A calculated move designed to prolong her suffering, to make her feel the slow, agonizing squeeze of financial ruin. Next, he turned his attention to the digital evidence. The video, raw and damning, was his most potent weapon. He didn't just have one copy. He had multiple, securely stored and encrypted. He began to craft his anonymous attack, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a detached efficiency. He found Rachel's company website, easily located her department's contact information, and crafted an email. The subject line was simple, yet devastating: urgent, professional misconduct by Rachel's last name. The body of the email contained a link to a cloud storage folder, carefully curated to include their most incriminating clips of the cheating footage, along with screenshots of the messages between Rachel and Chris, and a detailed, albeit anonymous, account of Rachel's since grisly erratic behavior and frequent work events that were, in fact, trysts. He knew Rachel's company prided itself on its ethical conduct and public image. The followed would be swift and brutal. He hit send, a grim satisfaction spreading through him. He then turned his attention to Chris, the betrayer, the snake in the grass. Ethan knew Chris was engaged to Anna, a sweet, unsuspecting woman who worked as a kindergarten. He found Anna's social media profiles, her public-facing ones, and then, with a few clicks, located her private accounts through mutual friends. He crafted a similar email, this time to Anna, with a subject line that would shatter her world, concerning regarding Chris's last name. The attached folder contained Thiessen damning footage, but with an added personal touch, screenshots of Chris' flirtatious messages to Rachel, his blatant lies to Anna about his whereabouts, and a detailed timeline of their affair. He also included a link to Rachel's company's public statement, which he knew would soon be released, confirming her termination. He hit send, imagining Anna's face as she watched her perfect world crumble. He knew she was a woman of strong moral character, and he knew she wouldn't keep this quiet. The public humiliation would be Chris's just dessert. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of chaos. Music to Ethan's ears. Within days, the whispers started. Rachel's company, true to form, launched an internal investigation. The evidence was irrefutable. Rachel was called into a closed-door meeting, and by the end of the week, the news spread like wildfire through their professional circles. Rachel had been fired. The official reason was restructuring, but the rumors, fueled by the leaked footage, painted a far uglier picture. Her carefully constructed professional image, built on years of hard work and ambition, lay in ruins. Ethan allowed himself a small, private smile. This was just the beginning. Chris's world imploded even faster. Anna, devastated and enraged, didn't just break off the engagement, she went public. She posted screenshots of the footage and messages on her social media, detailing Chris's betrayal, exposing him to their entire social circle, to his family, to his colleagues. The backlash was immediate and severe. Chris's reputation, once pristine, was shredded. He was ostracized, ridiculed, his name synonymous with deceit. Ethan watched from a distance, a detached observer, as the lives of his betrayers. He felt no joy, no elation, just a cold, quiet satisfaction. Justice, in its own brutal way, was being served. Finally, Ethan sent Rachel the divorce papers. He didn't send them through a lawyer. He sent them directly, a thick envelope filled with legal documents and a single, small USB drive. On the drive, he had recorded a voice note, his voice calm, devoid of emotion, a killing contrast to the raw pain he had once felt. Rachel, his voice echoed, "You breathed heart that was building your future. You didn't just cheat, you destroyed. A man, would have taken a bullet for you. This is the consequence of your choices. Consider this your final lesson." He pressed send, the digital delivery, a final, definitive severing of their ties. The revenge was sweet, yes, but it was also a bitter reminder of the love he had lost, the future that had been stolen. He was free, but the scars would remain. And the journey to true healing was just beginning. Final confrontation weeks turned into months. The dust of the initial explosion had settled, leaving behind a landscape of shattered lives. Ethan, now living in a small, meticulously organized apartment closer to the hospital, had found a sense of routine. He threw himself into his work, the controlled chaos of the ER, a welcome distraction from the turmoil within. He was efficient, focused, a machine of healing, but beneath the surface, the scars of betrayals still throbbed. He avoided social gatherings, preferring the quiet solitude of his new life. He had cut all ties with their mutual friends, unable to bear the awkward silences, the knowing glances, the unspoken questions. He was a man adrift, navigating the choppy waters of his new reality, but at least he was navigating them alone, on his own terms. Then the email arrived. A single line, stark and direct. "Ethan, I need to see you. One last time, please." It was from Rachel. His heart, which he thought had hardened into stone, gave a faint tremor. He considered deleting it, ignoring it, pretending it never existed. But a part of him, a part he hadn't realized, was still alive. Yearned for closure, for a final, definitive end to the agonizing chapter of their lives. He agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a quiet park on the outskirts of the city, a place devoid of shared memories, a blank canvas for their final act. He arrived early, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his gaze fixed on the path. He saw her approaching, a figure diminished, her once vibrant energy replaced by a wary resignation. Her hair, usually meticulously styled, was pulled back in a messy bun. Her clothes, once designer, were now simple, almost drab. The confident, ambitious marketing executive was gone, replaced by a woman who looked like she had been through a war. His heart, despite everything, ached for the ghost of the woman he had loved. But the ache was quickly overshadowed by the cold, hard truth of her betrayal. She sat opposite him on the park bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes redrimmed and swollen. "Ethan," she began, her voice a fragile whisper, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake." Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks in silent rivers. "I was so confused, so lost. I didn't know what I was doing. He manipulated me. He made me feel special. And I was so stressed with work, with IVF. I lost myself." She painted a picture of a victim, a woman led astray by a cunning predator, a narrative designed to elicit sympathy, to absolve her of responsibility. She spoke of her firing, of the public humiliation, of the isolation she now faced. She was a broken woman, begging for forgiveness, for a second chance, for a return to the life she had so carelessly discarded. Ethan listened, his face a mask of calm, his gaze steady, unwavering. He felt no anger, nor itch, just a profound aching. Sadness. He had anticipated this, had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind. He knew her playbook, her manipulative tactics, her ability to twist reality to suit her needs. He let her speak, letting her pour out her careful construct, narrative of victimhood, of emotional confusion. When she finally finished, her voice hoarse, her body trembling with the force of her sobs, a heavy silence descended upon them, broken only by the chirping of birds and the distant hum of traffic. "Rachel," Ethan said, his voice low, measured, each word a deliberate hammer blow. "You didn't just cheat. You destroyed a man who would have taken a bullet for you." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken pain, of shattered dreams, of a future that had been stolen. "You didn't just make a mistake, you made a choice. Every single day, every late night, every whispered lie, every time. You guarded your phone. Every time you blamed me for being too controlling. Every time you chose him over me, over us, over everything we built." He paused, letting his words sink in, letting the full weight of his accusation settle upon her. "You didn't just break my heart, Rachel. You shattered my trust. You poisoned my memories. You made me question everything I thought was real." He watched as her carefully constructed facade crumbled. The tears flowed faster now, not manipulative tears of a woman seeking absolution, but the raw, guttural sobs of a woman facing the unvarnished truth of her actions. She tried to speak, but no words came, only choked gasps and desperate pleas. Ethan stood up, his legs feeling surprisingly steady. He looked down at her, a figure of utter despair, and felt a strange sense of detachment. The love he had once felt for her was gone, replaced by a quiet emptiness. He had faced his monster, and it was not the terrifying beast he had imagined, but a broken, pathetic figure consumed by her own choices. "Goodbye, Rachel," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, a final, definitive severing of their ties. He turned and walked away, leaving her alone on the bench, her sobs echoing in the quiet afternoon. He didn't look back. He didn't. Neato, the chapter was closed. The book was finished, and he was finally, truly free. Moving on and closure, the road to healing was long and arduous, a winding path filled with unexpected detours and sudden precipices. Ethan, however, was no stranger to difficult journeys. He had faced death countless times in the ER, had witnessed the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable pain. He approached his own recovery with the same methodical deterioration. He started therapy, a weekly pilgrimage to a quiet office where he couldn't pack the trauma, the anger, the profound sense of betrayal. Dr. Evelyn Reed, his therapist, was a calm, insightful presence, guiding him through the labyrinth of his emotions, helping him to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about integrating the pain, about learning to live with the scars without letting them define him. He learned to articulate the swirling chaos of his emotions, to untangle the threads of anger, sadness, and confusion. He began to understand that forgiveness wasn't about condoning Rachel's actions, but about releasing himself from the corrosive grip of resentment. He realized that his desire to fix everything, a trait so valuable in his profession, had blinded him to the deeper cracks in his personal life. He was learning to accept that some things, once broken, could not be put back together in the same way, and that sometimes peace meant letting go. One of the first steps he took was to adopt a dog, a scruffy, energetic terrier mix named Buster, who filled his quiet apartment with a joyful chaos. Buster demanded walks, bilirubs, and unconditional affection, pulling Ethan out of his self-imposed isolation, forcing him to engage with the world again. He reconnected with old friends, cautiously at first, then with a renewed sense of purpose. Ben, his best friend, who had been devastated by Chris's betrayal, became a steadfast ally, a sounding board for his thoughts and feelings. They spent hours talking, dissecting the past, rebuilding their friendship on a foundation of honesty and shared understanding. Ethan also started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding solace in the quiet companionship of the animals, in the simple act of caring for another living being. Life, slowly but surely, began to regain its color. He found joy in simple things, the first sip of coffee in the morning, the warmth of the sun on his face, the wag of Buster's tail when he returned home. He was learning to trust again, not blindly, but with a new He understood now that the signs had been there, subtle at first, then glaring, but his love, his desire to believe in the perfect life, had blinded him. He had been so focused on fixing things, on being the hero, that he had failed to see the rot beneath this surface. The betrayal had been a brutal lesson, but it had also been a catalyst for profound personal growth. He was stronger, wiser, more attuned to the complexities of humanity, both good and bad. News of Chris reached him through the grapevine. Chris, who had lost his fiancée, his job, and his reputation, had spiraled into a world of self-destruction. He was later arrested for drug charges, a pathetic end to a once promising life. Ethan felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of inevitability. Justice, in its own brutal way, had found its course. Rachel, too, had fallen. Ethan saw her once, by chance, working at a coffee shop in a different part of the city. She looked tired, her eyes hollow, her once sparkling ambition replaced by a weary resignation. She didn't see him, and he didn't approach her. He simply observed, a silent witness to the consequences of her choices. He felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his shattered trust, of the pain she had inflicted. He wished her well, in a detached, almost clinical way, but he knew, with a profound certainty, that their paths would never cross again. Then, when he least expected it, he met Chloe. She was a veterinarian, kind and stable, with a gentle laugh and eyes that held a quiet understanding. Their connection was slow, organic, built on shared interests and a mutual respect. There was no dramatic spark, no whirlwind romance, just a comfortable, reassuring presence that felt like coming home. He was honest with her about his past, about the betrayal, about the scars that still lingered. She listened without judgment, her hand finding his, a silent promise of acceptance. Helen to trust again, to open his heart, not with the reckless abandon of youth, but with cautious wisdom of experience. He was no longer looking for a perfect life, but a real own, with all its imperfections and challenges. One evening, as they sat on his apartment balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below, Chloe leaned her head on his shoulder. "You've been through so much, Ethan," she whispered. He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Yes," he replied, "but it made me who I am today." He looked out at the sprawling city, at the endless possibilities that stretched before him. He had faced his demons, had walked through the fire, and had emerged stronger, more resilient. His final words, a quiet reflection on his journey, echoed in the stillness of the night. "Forgiveness is for me, forgetting, that's your punishment." He had found his peace, not in revenge, but in the quiet strength of his own resolve, in the unwavering belief that even after the darkest betrayals, life and love could still find a way to bloom. He was finally, truly home.